Okay, let's unpack this. You've asked about the truth in mediumship. And yeah, it's a world full of mystery, hope, and sometimes, yeah, a little bit of confusion too.
Definitely.
So for this deep dive, we're really diving into a stack of sources. You've shared articles, research notes, even some, real-world anecdotes people have shared online.
That's right. And our mission today really is to try and cut through some of that noise. We want to explore what genuine psychic and mediumistic insight might actually look like, at least according to these texts you gave us,
Right.
and hopefully arm you with the knowledge to spot the ethical practitioners from, well, the potential pitfalls. Because the sources make it clear those are definitely out there too.
Absolutely. And just so you know, this deep dive is tailored just for you, based only on the sources you've shared. We're going to aim to be direct, honest, ethical in how we explore this.
Yeah, we're focusing only on what these specific sources tell us.
Think of us as your guides, just sort of navigating this complex landscape together, looking at the map these sources have laid out for us.
And it's definitely a space where beliefs, experiences, they vary widely. These sources really reflect that. They cover everything from what sound like powerful, really transformative insights, all the way to, frankly, outright scams.
Yeah.
So our goal is simply to illuminate what these texts lay out, help you understand the different facets presented here without adding our own opinions or spin. It's really about understanding the landscape as described in the material you provided.
Exactly. So let's jump right into that terrain. The sources you've given us, they spend a lot of time highlighting the areas where you need to be most cautious.
Yeah, they do.
They lay out some really clear red flags to watch out for in what people often call psychic scams.
And, it makes sense that the sources would lead with this. Focus on protection first, right?
Right.
One of the most common and honestly pretty insidious scams detailed involves telling clients they have a curse or, some kind of spiritual blockage. This came up again and again as a primary warning sign.
Oh yeah, this was a major theme across the material. And the pitch, it's alarmingly consistent, isn't it?
It really is.
Only the psychic can remove it. And the demand is often like thousands of dollars for this cleansing or spiritual battle. One source didn't pull any punches, just flat out called this a standard sales pitch in the business.
Yeah, and it's a deeply manipulative tactic. It's designed explicitly to exploit vulnerability. I mean, think about it. Someone reaches out because they're looking for guidance, maybe comfort, help with a real-life challenge.
Yeah, they're already in a vulnerable spot.
Exactly. And instead of offering support or genuine insight, the practitioner immediately tells them something is fundamentally wrong with them or their life, something unseen, powerful, like a curse.
Right.
And then they present themselves as the only possible solution. It targets fear, desperation, and maybe a lack of understanding about, spiritual processes.
And the anecdotes from the sources, they really drive home how damaging this can be. There's that one particularly alarming example about a psychic demanding, what was it, $3,000 initially?
Yeah, $3,000 to remove a supposed curse.
And then just a few weeks later, they call the client back, claiming the curse wasn't gone, but was actually coming back stronger.
Stronger. And then demanded another $5,000 for more work.
Wow. That pattern, right? The escalating demands for this invisible problem, that's a classic illustration of the kind of exploitation the sources are warning about.
And it rarely stops there. According to the material, this scam often goes hand in hand with weaponizing fear and threats. The sources describe unethical psychics making just terrifying claims, like telling a client you or your family will die within a week if you don't pay for this cleansing.
That's just awful.
Or predicting devastating long-term consequences, like losing your job and never finding another one for years, and directly linking it to this supposed spiritual blockage that only they can fix.
That's beyond unethical. It's incredibly cruel. It's designed purely to induce panic, right? Emotional distress, to pressure immediate, often huge payments.
Precisely. And the sources strongly emphasize that ethical practice explicitly avoids instilling fear, despair, or any sense of impending doom.
Yeah, that seems fundamental.
Yet we saw specific, shocking examples mentioned right there in the material you gave us, like that psychic who reportedly predicted death at 23 in that Reddit anecdote.
Right, I remember that one. And wasn't there another mention about a landlord predicting a house fire death?
Yes, exactly. Those stories highlight just how inappropriate and potentially harmful these kinds of negative predictions can be. The sources specifically note that predicting death, especially using tools like tarot cards, is generally seen as highly unethical.
Or even impossible within legitimate practice, right?
Or even impossible, yes. The focus should always be on empowering the individual, offering choices, not trapping them in fear of some fixed negative future.
Okay, so beyond the outright threats, the sources also warn about these sort of pressure cooker tactics
Ah.
related to repeated and expensive services.
Yeah, that's another big one. The sources say, be wary if a psychic pressures you to book your next reading while you're still in the current one,
Uh-huh.
or insists you need multiple costly sessions to address the exact same issue that was supposedly tackled before.
Right, like we need another session to reinforce the work or something.
Exactly. This behavior, again, it's about fostering dependency. Scammers, according to these texts, want clients to feel like they always need their services to keep the fix going, or maybe to address new problems they conveniently discover.
And they pressure you to exceed your budget.
Often, yes. They might start with a low initial fee, make it seem accessible, but then escalate the cost rapidly. They'll claim there's increasing spiritual difficulty or resistance that requires more expensive interventions.
Like that Reddit story you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
The $15 reading that suddenly needed to become a $200 communion.
That's a perfect example from the sources, a clear illustration of that pressure and the cost escalation tactic they describe.
Which often seems to follow a kind of bait-and-switch approach. The sources talk about how fraudsters typically start with what's known as cold reading,
Right, cold reading.
making statements that sound accurate but are actually very general, like, I sense a spiritual blockage, or you're having relationship trouble, or you feel like something's holding you back.
Exactly. These are common human experiences, aren't they? They resonate with a lot of people quite easily.
Yeah, you hear that and think, wow, they get me.
Right. It's a way to quickly build a false sense of trust and accuracy. The client thinks, oh, wow, they immediately picked up on my relationship issues. They must be the real deal.
But it's just a setup.
It's just a setup, according to the sources. Once they've hooked you with that initial vague accuracy, which might just come from observation or knowing common human problems, then they deliver the real scam pitch.
And they often tie it back to that first vague statement.
Precisely. They'll claim the relationship trouble is because of a curse only they can remove, or that the spiritual blockage requires an expensive cleansing only they can perform. It connects the hook to the scam.
And the pricing games. Another significant red flag the sources bring up repeatedly. Very cheap initial readings, like $10 or $20.
Yeah, the sources are pretty blunt about this. Those super cheap readings are almost always just a front, a way to get you in the door for those incredibly expensive upsells, especially the classic curse removals.
So the low price is the bait.
Absolutely. It makes it seem accessible, low risk. But the real money for the scammer is made on the back end with those high-pressure, high-cost scams.
And on the flip side, extremely high prices up front.
That's also flagged as suspicious in the sources, especially for things like purported spiritual warfare or intense cleansings right out of the gate.
So if someone immediately quotes you thousands for something vague,
That's presented as a major warning sign. While ethical practitioners, as the sources point out, do charge for their time and skill, prices that immediately jump into the thousands for these kinds of vague spiritual services should raise alarms.
it's interesting how the sources contrast this with ethical psychics, though. They suggest ethical practitioners charge a fair price based on what? Their experience.
Yeah, based on their experience level, the demand for their services, the quality of insight they provide. Basically, like any other skilled professional charges for their time and expertise.
Not based on manipulative fear tactics or preying on vulnerability.
Exactly. It's a professional exchange, not an exploitation.
Another critical distinction the sources make again and again is around anyone claiming they can fix you or your problems for you. Specifically, claiming they can clear your spiritual blocks or negative energy for a fee, like it's a service they perform on you.
Yes, this is presented as a fundamental misunderstanding or maybe a deliberate misrepresentation of how spiritual work typically operates, according to these texts.
The material seems unequivocal on this point. It states that this kind of deep, personal, and spiritual work, clearing blocks, healing energy, needs to be done by the individual themselves.
Precisely. Anyone claiming they can do that internal spiritual work for you as a paid external service is, according to these sources, very likely a scammer.
So, ethical practitioners guide you, but they don't do it for you.
That's the key difference we'll explore more. They guide you on how to do that self-work, but they don't perform it on you magically for a fee. It's about empowering you to heal and grow yourself, not creating a passive recipient of some paid-for fix.
Okay. The sources also point out a focus on hype over heart as another red flag for potential inauthenticity. things like spending excessive time and money on, like branding, collecting workshop certificates from famous names, or seeking celebrity associations.
Yeah, this connects strongly to concepts the sources introduced called the proximity trap and borrowed light.
Proximity trap, borrowed light. Okay, tell me more.
The proximity trap is basically the idea of seeking credibility by associating yourself with famous or well-known practitioners.
Ah, like name dropping.
Kind of, yeah. Collecting certificates, attending workshops taught by big names, maybe inflating claims about having studied under or been personally mentored by them. Even if it was just, a weekend seminar with hundreds of other people,
Right.
it creates this false sense of expertise and credibility. One source even called this the photo op professional phenomenon.
Huh. Photo op professional, I like that.
Mm.
So you attend a big event, get a picture with a famous medium.
And then you mark yourself as having studied under them. The sources frame this as building a career on borrowed light, riding on someone else's fame and perceived authority.
Instead of cultivating your own inner flame.
Exactly. Instead of doing the dedicated, often solitary practice and developing genuine care and skill yourself, it's building reputation based on external validation, association, marketing.
Rather than demonstrable skill developed through consistent inner work and ethical service.
Precisely. The sources suggest that genuine practitioners are often quieter about their associations, focusing more on the actual work and their personal development than on external hype.
Got it. And finally, a point worth repeating because the sources stress how damaging it is. The doom and gloom peddlers.
Yes. Unethical practice, according to the sources, heavily involves negative predictions and deliberately instilling fear or despair.
Whereas ethical practice is about empowerment.
Right. Ethical psychics, conversely, focus on empowering you, offering insights into potential paths and choices, highlighting ways you can improve your life or navigate challenges effectively.
So any message that leaves you feeling terrified, hopeless, helpless.
Or like, you have no free will, no power to change your situation.
That's a major warning sign flagged in the sources.
Absolutely. Those death prediction anecdotes we mentioned earlier from the Reddit thread, they're clear reported examples of exactly this type of unethical and harmful behavior.
Okay, wow. That's a really thorough look at what the sources advise us to avoid, the clear red flags to watch out for. So let's flip the coin. What does ethical, authentic psychic and mediumistic practice actually look like? According to these same sources, this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Absolutely. After outlining all those pitfalls, the sources do spend considerable time painting a picture of what genuine ethical practice entails. And the cornerstone, the absolute foundation, is client empowerment and autonomy.
So, okay, empowerment, that's the direct opposite of the scam tactics trying to create dependency and fear.
Exactly. The primary goal of an ethical practitioner, according to these sources, isn't to make you reliant on them, it's to empower you, to help you identify challenges or potential pitfalls on your own path.
And offer insights you can use.
Insights you can use to make informed choices and improvements in your life. They emphasize reinforcing your free will, that fundamental idea that you have choices and the capacity to make things better.
The sources are pretty explicit about this, aren't they? Ethical psychics actually want you to not need them long term.
Yes, that's a key takeaway. They provide guidance and insight so you can navigate your own path more effectively. They don't want you becoming what some sources might term a psychic junkie, needing constant external validation or direction.
And this links directly to that idea of fostering self-work, not dependency. You mentioned this was critical.
Incredibly clear on this point in the sources, almost repetitive. Deep personal and spiritual work like clearing blocks, healing negative energy must fundamentally be done by the individual themselves.
This really feels like the most crucial distinction from the scammer who claims they can just fix it for you.
It arguably is. The ethical practitioner's role, as described, is to guide you on how to work on your own blocks or negative energy.
So they might suggest methods like meditation or...
Yeah, exactly. They might suggest introspection, meditation, specific cleansing rituals you can do yourself, ways to connect with your own spirit guides or higher self or other personal practices. They provide the tools, maybe the map, offer support.
But you are the one who has to actually engage in the journey and do the work.
That's the core message. The sources even mention that highly ethical practitioners might actually teach clients techniques to remove their own negative energy. Again, emphasizing empowerment and self-reliance.
It's all about equipping you for your own spiritual journey, not just offering a paid Band-Aid.
Precisely. And we saw mentions in those Reddit threads you shared, people discussing techniques for clearing their own energy. That perfectly reflects this principle of self-reliance derived from guidance.
Okay, what about pricing? The sources mentioned ethical pricing.
Right. Fairness and transparency in pricing are consistently highlighted as key ethical standards. Ethical psychics, according to the sources, charge a fair price.
Based on what?
Based on their experience level, the market demand for their services, and the quality of the insight and time they're providing. Essentially, charging professionally for their skill and time.
So no hidden fees, no upselling during a session for magic curse removal.
Definitely not. No pressure whatsoever to exceed your stated budget or comfort level. And the sources make another really important specific point here. If someone is still developing their gifts, just practicing, maybe offering readings for experience,
Yeah.
they should not charge for those sessions. And they should be completely upfront and transparent with the person they're reading for about their status as a student or developing practitioner.
That's a really high ethical bar. Don't charge while you're learning.
It is, and it contrasts sharply with those scam models, the cheap bait and switch, or the exorbitant fees for fear-based services. Remember that Reddit anecdote about the grandmother?
The one who charged what people could afford, sometimes baked goods.
Yeah. That stands out as a reported example from the sources of a perceived ethical approach, one focused on genuine help over just monetary gain.
Confidentiality and respect also come up as non-negotiable standards in the sources.
Foundational, absolutely fundamental for building trust. Information shared during a reading must be kept strictly confidential.
Only disclosed with consent, or in very specific situations.
Exactly. Only with the client's explicit consent, or in very specific, serious legal or ethical situations involving an imminent threat of serious harm, where disclosure might potentially diffuse it. And even then, only disclosing what's absolutely necessary.
And respecting the client's autonomy.
Paramount. Respecting their rights, boundaries, preferences, never forcing opinions or lifestyle choices on them. The sources are very clear. Ethical practitioners withhold personal judgment.
Act as an unbiased vessel.
Yes, an unbiased vessel for information or connection. They must welcome all individuals without discrimination, regardless of background, identity, beliefs, lifestyle choices. It all comes down to that core principle: do no harm.
Using gifts only for healing, helping, supporting.
And empowering the client. These ethical pillars are presented as absolutely foundational. Without them, trust can't be built, and the practice risks moving away from genuine service towards potential exploitation, even if the practitioner isn't, intentionally running a scam.
Okay, so that covers the ethical framework described in the sources, how practitioners should conduct themselves. Now let's shift focus a bit. What about the experience itself? The quality of genuine insights, according to the sources. Beyond the practitioner's ethics, what do the sources tell us about the nature of genuine, psychic, or mediumistic information? How does it actually feel or present itself?
This is where the sources get quite specific and offer some really fascinating insights into the subtle nature of what they describe as authentic guidance. They describe the distinctive quality of genuine psychic thoughts as being often flat, unemotional, and impersonal.
Flat. That's really counterintuitive, isn't it? You'd think spiritual insight would feel, profound. Overwhelming, highly emotional.
Exactly, and that's partly why it's presented as a key identifier according to these sources. They emphasize that genuine psychic thoughts typically do not arouse strong emotions in the practitioner receiving them, or necessarily in the client either. And they certainly don't cater to your personal desires, hopes, or expectations.
Instead, they come with
a sense of calm, reassuring awareness.
Okay, calm and reassuring. That feels very different from the fear-mongering or the hype-driven promises of scammers we talked about.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? Panic, dread, overwhelming emotional appeals versus calm awareness.
So what are the characteristics described?
The sources get quite specific. They can be repetitive, persistent, delivered in an even-toned, unalarming, understated manner, often simple and concise. They might even seem insignificant or, boring at first.
Like that example in the source about the persistent thought to call an old friend. The one that unexpectedly leads to a job opportunity.
Exactly like that.
It wasn't some dramatic vision or a booming voice saying, call Sarah, she has a job.
Right.
It's just a simple, repetitive, persistent thought. It felt very matter-of-fact, almost neutral.
And crucially, as the source pointed out, it didn't explain why you should call. It didn't create any grand expectation about what would happen. It just was.
That example really illustrates those qualities. Simple, repetitive, persistent, matter-of-fact.
Yes. And the source uses the term baffling here, which leads to a really interesting point.
Go on.
The source suggests that if a psychic thought continues to baffle you, if you can't immediately rationalize why you're getting it or what it means, that can actually be a sign of a true psychic thought.
Wait, baffling is a positive sign. That really flips expectations.
It does, doesn't it? The reasoning, according to the source, is that guidance from a higher source or from spirit might operate on a level that our normal human rational thinking or ego's logic just doesn't immediately grasp.
Because our rational minds work with known patterns and information.
Right. But genuine insights might bypass or transcend that linear logic entirely.
So if a piece of information from a reading, or maybe even your own intuition, feels a bit off, or you can't quite figure out why you're getting that specific image or word or feeling, that lack of immediate rational sense could actually be a good sign.
According to the perspective presented in these sources, yes. It could suggest the information is coming from a source outside your typical ego-driven thought processes, which are usually trying to make sense of everything immediately.
Which ties into the next point the sources make, right?
Yeah.
Differentiating genuine insights from our own self-generated thoughts.
Exactly. Our own thoughts, the intuitive static, as one source memorably put it.
That internal chatter.
Right. Self-generated thoughts originate from the ego, the busy thinking mind. They're driven by our personal desires, emotions, expectations, memories, biases, fears, existing beliefs, all that internal stuff.
The constant monologue we all have going on.
And these thoughts, they're often linear, sometimes scattered, and they tend to reinforce what we already know or expect or maybe fear.
And they can feel like intuition sometimes.
They can be easily mistaken for intuition because they arise internally, but they lack that distinct, flat, unemotional, impersonal quality, that calm persistence the sources describe for genuine psychic insight. They feel like you thinking, even if they seem insightful at the time.
So recognizing the quality and the feeling of the thought is key to discerning its source, according to these texts.
Yeah.
How do you actually practice telling the difference, though? The sources offered a practical discernment exercise, didn't they?
Yes, they did. It's a technique you can use yourself, drawn directly from the sources, to practice this discernment. Step 1. Write down a specific question or concern you have that you'd like insight on. Be clear.
Okay, got it. Clear question.
Step 2. This is a really critical clearing step. List all your hopes, fears, concerns, expectations, potential outcomes, everything related to that question. Write down everything your ego and rational mind are already thinking or feeling about it.
Why? To get it out of the way.
Exactly. The purpose is to clear out that ego-based feedback, to acknowledge and externalize all that intuitive static first. Get it out on paper or in a document. Don't hold anything back.
Okay, clearing step, then what?
Step 3. Focus on your breath. Become quiet and receptive. Center yourself. Calm your mind as much as possible. Just create some internal space.
Make room for something else to come in.
Yes. Step 4. Now write down any thoughts, images, feelings, or impressions that surface after you've done the clearing and calming. The crucial part here, the source's stress, is to resist the temptation to overthink or rationally understand them immediately.
Don't analyze.
Don't try to analyze or interpret right away. Just capture exactly what comes through, no matter how small, seemingly insignificant, or, even baffling it seems.
Just receive and record. No judgment, no immediate analysis.
Exactly. Step 5. Allow those thoughts space and time. Let them sit. Don't force meaning onto them right away. The sources emphasize that those baffling thoughts, the ones that don't make immediate rational sense, might be the ones that are truly genuine. You might need to sit with them or come back to them later to understand their relevance.
That's a really powerful exercise from these sources. It kind of puts the power of discernment back in your hands, the listener's hands. Gives you a practical tool to start differentiating that internal noise from potential external guidance.
It absolutely does. And finally, in this section on the nature of insight, the sources make a technical distinction about the energy associated with psychic versus mediumistic information as perceived by the practitioner.
Okay, psychic versus mediumistic energy. How do those feel different, according to the texts?
A psychic, according to the sources, primarily reads the energy field and potential path of a living person. The energy associated with the information received through this type of connection is often described by practitioners as feeling relatively flat or neutral.
Flat energy when connecting to living people's information? Okay.
Yes, compared to the other type. Mediumship, on the other hand, involves connecting with the energy and consciousness of those who have passed away spirits. The sources say that information received from spirits tends to have discernibly more energy and life to it. It feels different.
Interesting. So the source of the information, living energy versus spirit energy, has a different palpable quality or feeling for the practitioner doing the connection.
That's the distinction described in the sources, yes. And the material notes that a professional medium who works with both realms, offering both psychic and mediumistic services, can apparently easily switch between these different gears or types of energetic connection during a reading, depending on what's needed or who is coming through.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears ourselves up. Let's explore what the sources say about how genuine psychic and mediumistic ability is actually cultivated over time, because it sounds like this isn't something you just pick up overnight in a weekend workshop, right?
Not at all. The sources strongly emphasize that genuine psychic and mediumistic ability involves a dedicated path. It requires years of consistent time, focused practice, and significant inner work.
This directly counters that whole proximity trap and borrowed light idea we talked about earlier, doesn't it?
Right.
Leveraging association instead of doing the work.
Absolutely. The sources are very clear. Real credibility, depth, and consistency in psychic or mediumistic work come from consistent, dedicated daily practice, attunement, and genuine spiritual growth over time.
And it requires emotional maturity, personal development.
Yes, it necessitates developing a significant degree of emotional maturity and undertaking substantial personal development. That includes, importantly, healing your own inner trauma and integrating suppressed emotions.
Why is healing inner trauma and emotional baggage so necessary for developing these abilities, according to the sources? What's the connection?
Well, the sources suggest it's fundamentally about becoming a clear and reliable conduit, a channel for healing messages and accurate information. Unhealed emotional wounds, unresolved trauma, or suppressed emotions, they can potentially interfere with the connection.
Cloud it, distort it.
Exactly. Cloud or distort the connection to spirit or the psychic information coming through. It's about ensuring your own internal channel is as clear and balanced as possible, especially because, as the sources note, attuning to these energies will inevitably heighten your own sensitivities. You need to be balanced to handle that.
So it's not just about receiving messages. It's about ensuring you're a clear, undistorted channel for those messages to come through accurately and with integrity. Makes sense.
Precisely. And the sources are unequivocal. Genuine development cannot be rushed. It certainly cannot be faked. And it's not acquired merely by attending workshops or seeking celebrity association. They describe it as a lifelong process of refinement.
How long are we talking? Do they give specifics?
One source is quite specific, yeah. It suggests a minimum of an hour a day dedicated purely to attuning to spirit energy, and that it typically takes 5 to 10 years of consistent practice just to become good at mediumship. But even then, the path of development continues indefinitely beyond that.
Wow. 5 to 10 years just to get good.
Yeah.
That really puts it into perspective. It's like mastering any other complex profession or skill.
Exactly. The sources explicitly use that analogy, comparing it to any other profession requiring long hours of practice and learning over many, many years to achieve genuine proficiency.
And a key part of this development, according to the sources, is the role of guides and this process of attunement.
Yes, the often misunderstood role of guides in attunement. Attunement being like tuning a radio to a specific frequency, as we mentioned.
Right.
The sources explain that this tuning process, this attunement to spirit energy, is typically handled by one's own spirit guides. And critically, this is important, the relationship and the method of working with spirit guides is unique to each individual medium.
So you can't just copy someone else.
Well, one important warning highlighted in the sources is that trying to force yourself to incorporate another medium system or way of working onto your own natural process can actually harm or hinder your unique connection and organic development.
So trying to copy someone else's specific technique or framework might actually be counterproductive for you.
According to these sources, it very well could be, because your guides work with your unique energy and path. It's a personal connection.
So what do they recommend instead of just jumping into classes?
The sources strongly suggest a perhaps counterintuitive path. They recommend practicing sitting daily just to attune to your own guides and spirit energy for 1 to 2 years.
A year or two. Before seeking tutors.
Yes, before even seeking tutors or formal training. And then, when you do feel ready to seek guidance, ask your guides for recommendations on who would be the right teacher or tutor for you.
That requires a tremendous amount of patience and trust in your own internal process in connection with your guides.
It absolutely does. And they note, again, that this process of attuning and opening up will heighten your sensitivities, which is another reason why consistent personal healing, emotional balance, and grounding practices are presented as absolutely necessary for navigating this journey sustainably.
The sources also go into quite significant detail, providing what feels like very practical guidance on essential practices specifically for mediums during development and practice.
Yes, they lay out a surprisingly detailed, almost step-by-step framework clearly derived from a practitioner's perspective. For preparation, before a reading, or maybe a development circle,
What do they suggest?
practical things like having pen, paper, or a recorder ready. But also spiritual preparation, saying a prayer before intentionally powering up or opening their energy to connection. Clearly stating their intention, like saying, "Let's begin."
And closing down properly, too.
Just as important, yes. Stating the intention to close down properly after finishing. Saying something explicit like, "We are finished, please close me down and return my energy to myself." It's about setting very clear energetic boundaries for starting and stopping the connection process.
Establishing intentionality and control.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the learning and practice itself?
The sources suggest actively asking your guides what aspects of your mediumship you need to work on, and then diligently working for the answer or the necessary development yourself. Understanding symbols is presented as key.
Symbols from spirit.
Yes, spirits often use symbols as a form of shorthand, apparently, and you build a unique database of what these symbols mean to you over time through practice and validation.
So they're personal symbols, not universal.
Exactly. A white rose might become your specific symbol for a mother figure in spirit, or a tobacco pipe for a grandfather, based on your personal experiences or the symbols your guides learn to use with you, especially if you're clairvoyant, receiving visual information.
So it's like building a shared language with spirit and guides.
That's a good way to put it. The sources emphasize these symbols are unique to you and drawn from your own subconscious database of things you've seen, known, or experienced. You also learn, they say, to feel the energy and emotions emanating from spirit to understand their personality and who they were.
And identifying who's there.
Yeah, beginning to identify who is present by where you feel their energy, maybe on the left side for a paternal figure, or the right for maternal, is an example given. It varies.
And when the medium is ready to actually deliver the information to someone, a shitter, what's the advice from the sources then?
The core advice is relay the information exactly as it touches your mind, even if it seems random or doesn't make sense to you initially. Don't filter it through your own logic too much.
Just say what you get.
Pretty much. You can ask spirit for more information if needed, of course. And for control during a reading, especially for new mediums, the sources offer specific advice.
Like what?
Set the intention for only one spirit to come through at a time. This helps avoid getting overwhelmed and minimizes the chances of getting a no from the sitter when you're trying to identify multiple spirits at once, which can really shake a new medium's confidence.
Ah, that makes sense. Manage the complexity while you're learning.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yes. And they suggest specific techniques for difficult moments, too. You can ask spirits questions directly in your mind.
Like asking for clarification.
Yeah. If you're struggling with accuracy on names or dates, the sources suggest you can actually ask the spirit if they can show it to you clearly, or even write it out energetically for you to perceive.
Ask spirit to write it out. Wow.
If you're getting a baffling image, ask the spirit directly for its meaning. If you're trying to place a spirit in the sitter's family, you can ask your guides to show you where they fit on a visualized family tree.
These are really specific, tangible techniques described in the sources, using visualization like a family tree.
They are, and they illustrate the active role the medium takes in managing and refining the connection. When delivering the information, the sources reiterate. Say it as it touches your mind, raw and unedited.
But maybe translate bad language.
Right, maybe translate actual swear words into something like colorful language if that's how the spirit's personality is coming through strongly. The sources suggest that spirits have often rehearsed what they want to convey, so allow them freedom of expression through you.
But don't add your own stuff.
Crucially, yes, do not add or embellish the information yourself based on your own thoughts, assumptions, or interpretations. The less you are involved in interpreting or adding, the purer the mediumship is. That's a direct message from these sources.
Don't inject your own ego or narrative into the message. Got it. What if you get a no? The sitter says the information isn't right.
The sources advise, own it gracefully. Don't try to force it or make excuses or make it fit. Simply acknowledge it and maybe ask the spirit if they can provide the information in another way that might resonate.
And they're realistic about accuracy.
Very. The sources state clearly that even the best, most experienced mediums don't get everything right. They suggest that getting, say, 8 out of 10 points of information correct in a reading is actually considered a good professional hit rate.
That really helps manage expectations, doesn't it? For both the developing practitioner and anyone receiving a reading. It acknowledges the human element, the complexity of this communication.
It absolutely does. The sources also provide a bit more context on how spirits communicate according to this perspective. They use things you, the medium, have seen or experienced from your own subconscious database as building blocks for symbols or imagery.
Ah, so they draw on the medium's own library.
Yes, and symbols for passing conditions are generally not literal bodily sensations. Like, tire marks might be used as a symbol for a car crash, not feeling the impact. Or a tingling sensation on the chin could symbolize passing from hanging, not the actual physical sensation.
Okay, symbolic, not literal physical re-experiencing. And what about safety? Dealing with bad dudes from the spirit world.
The sources suggest that typically guides protect mediums from bad dudes, meaning spirits who haven't cleansed or are of a lower vibration aren't usually allowed to connect in a formal professional reading context.
That offers a sense of safety from this particular viewpoint described in the sources.
Yes, the sources state that generally only spirits who are cleansed, meaning they are of a higher vibration and ready to connect in a helpful, healing way, are allowed to come through by the guides managing the connection.
And finally, what about practice?
After developing sufficiently, doing practice readings with strangers is seen as absolutely essential. You need that real-world experience.
Dealing with real grief, real emotions.
Exactly. Sitting with people experiencing genuine grief, tears, joy, or even sometimes hostility or skepticism that helps season the medium. And honesty within development circles, being willing to say when information is wrong, is stressed as vital for the learning process of everyone involved.
Okay, beyond the practice of giving readings, the sources also detail some really crucial professional boundaries, specifically for mediums, emphasizing how necessary they are for the practitioner's well-being and the integrity of the work.
This is incredibly important, yes. The sources describe these boundaries as the distance a medium uses to avoid getting too emotionally affected by the grief, sorrow, and difficulties their clients are facing.
So it's about maintaining a professional emotional distance, not becoming personally overwhelmed or taking on the client's pain.
Exactly. It's presented as a necessity so that the medium isn't personally damaged or constantly weighed down by sad situations, like connecting with a parent in spirit for a grieving child day after day.
But it's not about being heartless.
No, the sources clarify it's not about being heartless. It's about maintaining a clear, neutral mind so they can work properly and receive information accurately without their own emotions coloring or blocking the connection. It's really about not taking the work home with you emotionally.
And a core boundary mentioned is learning to intentionally turn off abilities in personal life.
Yes. Avoiding what the sources might call leaky mediumship. You have to learn not to be constantly tuned in to spirit energy or picking up information about everyone around you all the time.
Like knowing your friend's secrets without them telling you.
That's an example given, yes. Or the sources give vivid examples of spirits potentially waking you up at 3 a.m. with a message, or getting all excited and chatty about future readings you're scheduled for later in the week.
So mediums need to set boundaries with spirit themselves, not just with clients.
Absolutely crucial, according to the sources, and spirits and guides are said to respect these boundaries once established. Setting clear, firm rules with the spirit world is presented as vital for the medium's sanity and control.
Rules like?
Rules like, no 3 a.m. messages, please, only during waking hours unless it's a true emergency, or no spirits in the bedroom or bathroom, or please don't bother me during my downtime or workday unless it's genuinely urgent. The sources state very clearly that spirits and guides will respect these boundaries once they are clearly and consistently set by the medium.
That's a really fascinating and empowering piece of information for anyone developing these abilities, that you have autonomy and can set the terms of the connection.
It really is, and avoiding that constant leaky mediumship by reserving intentional connection for dedicated development time, practice sessions, and professional readings is vital, because being constantly tuned in all day is described as incredibly draining energetically.
Which leads naturally to the need for self-care practices.
Yes, the sources strongly emphasize that regular grounding and closing down practices after connecting are essential. This includes that intentional closing down statement we talked about.
But also physical and energetic practices.
Right. Things like drinking water to ground, maybe sending absent healing energy to others, which apparently helps burn off excess built-up energy, prayer, or spending time in nature. These are needed to dissipate the psychic energy accumulated during connection, prevent energetic draining, and maintain overall balance.
And personal healing is ongoing.
Yes, the sources circle back to the importance of continued personal healing and development for emotional balance throughout a medium's career. They note that mediums are often natural healers themselves, but they need to tend to their own well-being consistently.
Wow. Okay, listening to all this from the sources, it sounds like a really rigorous, demanding, and lifelong path. It requires significant personal discipline, ethical commitment, and consistent self-care.
It is definitely presented as such in these texts. It's about cultivating a clear, stable, ethical channel through consistent inner work, dedicated practice over many years, and diligent boundary setting. It's not portrayed as easy or glamorous.
So, with all this information we've unpacked, from the sources, spotting scams, understanding ethical practice, the nature of genuine insight, this demanding path of authentic development, what does it mean for you, the listener? How do you apply this knowledge to your own journey, or maybe when you're seeking guidance from a practitioner?
Yeah, this brings us back to empowerment. The sources really emphasize building and, crucially, trusting your own internal authenticity radar.
Trusting your gut feeling, basically.
Exactly. If a message or a proposal from a practitioner feels fundamentally wrong, if it sounds like a high-pressure sales technique, if it instills fear rather than empowerment, or if it just defies common sense based on the principles of ethical practice we've discussed.
Trust that feeling.
Absolutely trust that feeling, the sources say. Your internal radar, your intuition, combined with critical thinking informed by this kind of knowledge, is your first and most important line of defense against manipulation.
And revisiting the power of self-work. We heard this repeatedly in the sources as a core principle, didn't we?
It's such a vital takeaway. If you believe you have spiritual blocks, negative energy attachments, or personal healing work to do, the sources strongly, repeatedly recommend that the primary work on these should be done by yourself.
But ethical practitioners can guide you.
Yes, ethical practitioners can guide you on how to approach that work. They might suggest methods like introspection, meditation, cleansing rituals you can perform, or ways to connect with your own guides or higher self. But the deep internal work and the responsibility for it remain yours.
So someone promising to magically fix or remove your internal blocks for you through a paid service they perform on you.
That person is likely operating outside the ethical framework described in these sources. While an ethical person shows you how you can work on these things yourself, empowering you.
That's the critical distinction the sources highlight. And it is incredibly empowering, isn't it? It acknowledges your innate capacity for self-improvement and healing. Shifts the focus from seeking some external savior to cultivating your own internal strength and connection.
Precisely. And remember those Reddit examples, people describing their own methods for clearing energy, that reflects this principle of self-reliance, maybe derived from guidance they received.
Finally, there's that interesting, maybe more abstract, but potentially transformative concept from the sources called the eye of the spirit.
Ah, yes, the eye of the spirit. This concept came up in the context of discussing different ways of perceiving the world, suggesting a level of seeing that goes beyond purely empirical or rational evidence.
How is it described?
It's described as the ability to recognize whole potential and possibilities that might not be immediately obvious based just on current circumstances or evidence.
It was used in the sources to describe how someone with a developed spiritual perspective, perhaps cultivated through meditation or inner work, might see the full potential in a client or in a difficult situation, even when faced with significant challenges.
Yes, exactly. Seeing beyond the immediate problems or limitations to the underlying capacity for growth and positive change. And for you, the listener, the sources suggest applying this concept to yourself. Cultivating your own eye of the spirit, perhaps through practices like that discernment exercise or other forms of self-work and intuition development, allows you to see your own full potential, your own capacity for change. To recognize possibilities in your life that might transcend your current problems or what your rational mind currently thinks is possible.
So it's a way of seeing yourself and the world that aligns with genuine spiritual growth and possibility, fundamentally distinct from those limited, fearful, or rigid perspectives that scammers might try to sell you.
Beautifully put, yes. It empowers you to see the light within yourself and the potential for building your own positive future.
So wow. We've really taken a deep dive into what these specific sources tell us about the truth of mediumship today. We've navigated from those really clear signs of scams demanding money for curses, using fear tactics, all the way to the ethical foundations of empowering clients, fostering self-work, and operating with integrity and transparency.
Hmm. We've explored the subtle, often unemotional nature of genuine psychic thoughts, according to these texts. That counterintuitive idea that baffling information can actually be significant. We looked at the demanding importance of patience and deep inner work in authentic development, and the absolute necessity of strong boundaries for practitioners to work effectively and ethically over the long haul.
And ultimately, these sources powerfully highlight that your own intuition, your commitment to your own self-work, and your ability to discern quality and intention, those are your most powerful tools in navigating this space.
Absolutely. Ethical guidance, according to these texts, supports your journey. It reinforces your free will and your innate capacity for growth and healing. It doesn't try to take your power away.
You know, perhaps the deepest insight from this guy, really drawing it all together from these sources, is this idea that true authenticity in this realm, whether you're looking for it in a practitioner or cultivating it in your own developing intuitive knowing, isn't found in that borrowed light, is it?
No, not an external validation or quick fixes.
It's about cultivating your own inner flame through dedicated work, ethical conduct, a genuine commitment to service, and maybe most importantly, the courage to trust your own inner knowing and your own capacity for growth.
So the question left for you is, what does building your own light look like for you starting now?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the truth of mediumship, based entirely on the sources you provided.